I built a road on my own land, not a luxury, not a hobby, just to keep my farm alive. I spent 2 months clearing brush, grading the soil, hauling in truckloads of gravel. I paid for every inch myself. No HOA paid, no committee helped. And the last time I drove down the road that morning, the sound of tires on the gravel, the open sky ahead, that same day, the HOA came in the dark of night and put up a steel gate on my road. And not just a gate, they sent me a bill, $300 a month to drive on my own road. They thought I would chain the gate in anger and tear it down. They thought I would make a mistake, but I didn't destroy the gate. I destroyed everyone behind the gate from within the law. I can still remember that moment. The morning light hadn't quite risen, coffee cup in hand, smoke rising. Standing in front of it, I see the gate as if it had grown out of the ground overnight. Square steel posts set deep into the fresh concrete, a keypad at eye level, and a small black camera off to the side, placed at such an angle that if someone did something in anger, their face would be captured directly. The sign was very clear, unusually clear. Authorized vehicles only. Road access fee, $300 a month, and at the very bottom, in small letters as if no one would read, managed by Access Management LLC. There was no county seal, no official HOA letterhead, just a generic company name asking me for money. In that moment, I realized this was not a warning. This was not a notice. This was an invoice. I had fought for this road for weeks and weeks, rocks, roots, heat, with everything. Every day I returned home with dust in my hair, shaking hands, and a back so sore that I didn't even have the strength to complain because the work was necessary. This road wasn't just a road. This road was the lifeline of my farm. I had driven the entire road for the first time the day before, slowly, carefully. There were no detour signs, there were no passing here signs. The road was open, it was quiet, I had it. And now, a lock, a camera, and a price tag on freedom. I knew what people would say. I didn't need to read the comments. This is your land. Break down the gate. Take it down in 5 minutes. They weren't wrong about one thing. I had the equipment. I had the power. I had the right. But what they didn't understand, I knew as soon as I saw the gate, it wasn't there to stop me. This was to trap me. They wanted me to be angry. They wanted me to make a mistake in front of the camera. They wanted the story to be like, angry farmer destroys HOA property. And right at that moment, I decided this fight wouldn't be loud. This fight would be slow, silent, and it would end in a way, something they never imagined. Many people think this story is about a road. No. This story is about that moment when someone decides that your life's work is worth less than their rules. When a man is forced to ask permission to walk on his own land by a few rules written on a piece of paper. I knew if I put on the chain today, I'll be in court tomorrow, and that's what they wanted. So I put down my coffee cup. I didn't touch the gate. I didn't bring the chain. I was just standing, and I understood. From today, this fight will be won not by my anger, but by my patience. Because some people don't understand power. They understand paper, timeline, law. And they still didn't know. I won't break the gate. I will start something which will eventually force them to take down that gate themselves. Should the HOA officer be punished if he did it wrong? Comment and subscribe to us. When I tell you this story isn't just about a road, people don't understand at first. They think it's about land, papers, the law, all that. But the truth is much deeper. It starts long ago, back when this land wasn't just a location, it was an identity. I work in the northern part of Clearbrook County, where the trees suddenly thin out and the fields open up before your eyes. This land was my grandfather's. Back then, there were no subdivision names, no signs, no board meetings to decide who would do what when. Back then, there was just the land, the sky, and the work. My father worked this land his whole life, his father before him. None of them were rich. Big houses, cottages by the lake, the stock market, there was nothing. There was just the land. The land they paid taxes for, the land they worked their bodies for, the land that fed us when there was nothing else to feed us. This land taught me one thing from a very young age. Order doesn't mean rules imposed by anyone. Order means rhythm, seasons, work. Getting up and working the same way every day, whether anyone is watching or not. But Clearbrook Meadows didn't understand that. They liked the village from a distance. They liked the view, green fields, open sky, quiet. But they didn't want noise, dust, diesel, or early morning trucks. They wanted the farm to be a backdrop, not moving, not changing, never disturbing. I didn't bother anyone at first. I drove slowly. I waved. I kept my head down. As long as their rules didn't work for me, it wasn't a problem. Then came the rules. Heavy traffic is prohibited from 6 in the morning to 6 in the evening. That's when a farm is in operation. Excessive traffic requires a permit, fines for dust, warning for words, which aren't really words, they're actions. They called them safety, community harmony, quality of life. But crop boards don't understand meetings, cattle don't look at calendars, and buyers don't sit around until you get permission. I tried to adapt. I made deliveries early in the morning and late in the evening. I drove trucks in the dark. I organized my work to fit the routine of people who had never stood in the rain mending fences. Nothing changed. One missed delivery became two. Two ended in a deal. A buyer who had worked with my father for 20 years called and said he couldn't wait any longer. There was no anger in his voice. There was reality. He had an account too. That's how things break down. Not in one day, not dramatically. Little by little, the pressure builds until a man starts to slip. One night, I was sitting at the kitchen table, invoices spread out in front of me. The coffee was cold. The numbers weren't moving. I was thinking about my father. If he saw me asking permission to go onto his farm, what would he say? I could see it if I closed my eyes. He was shaking his head, not angry, disappointed. I knew in that moment that I didn't want to accept it. It wasn't about rules. It wasn't about safety. It wasn't about community. It was about control. Who gets to decide how, when, and whether a man gets to go onto his own land? That's the real question. And once you understand that, don't expect compromise. Don't think that everything will be okay at the next meeting. That's when you start looking for another way. That's when I remembered my father. He pointed at the pasture behind him and said, almost to himself, there used to be a service road there, county, before it was a highway. It didn't make sense then. Kids don't think about roads. They assume there's always a way. But that day, sitting in the car outside the HOA office, staring at the glass door where I had to ask permission to do my own work when I entered, the memory jolted apart. I didn't go in. I sat there for a while with the engine off. Then I turned the car around and drove home. That day, I got out the map, old plats, county surveys, yellow files from online archives. It took hours and hours. Then suddenly I saw it, a thin line, almost invisible. It said, unmaintained public right-of-way. A section of the road went right through my property. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't a loophole. It was just something that everyone had forgotten. That night, I called my daughter, Ellie. She's studying civil engineering, quiet but very clear-headed. I told her what I had found. He didn't ask any questions. He didn't threaten. He just said, send the files. The next day, the two of us stood in the weeds, what had once been a road and could be again. Ellie was slowly measuring, watching where the water would go. Finally, he said, it can be done. It won't be easy. I laughed. Easy never saved this farm.
It didn't start suddenly. Everything progressed as if someone was deliberately increasing the pressure little by little, so that you would suffocate before you knew it. From the day after the gate was installed, I understood. It wasn't just a matter of the road anymore. It was my time, my patience, and waiting for me to make a mistake. They didn't do much for the first week. That was the scariest part. No threats, no letters, no official notices. Just the gate stood there, black, cold, silent, as if saying, we're here, and you decide how far we'll go. I would get up early as before. The habit hadn't changed. But every time I started the truck, a calculation would run through my head. Will it be stopped again today? Will something new come today? That uncertainty was their first low. Then the little things started. One morning, the feed supplier called and said, bro, there's a little problem today. The HOA said something is going on with the road. We can't enter until we get confirmation. When he said that, his tone wasn't like he was against me. It was like he was in trouble himself. But the result was the same. The delivery was canceled. I said, the road is on my own land. He was silent for 2 seconds. Then he said, I know, but they say liability. Liability, that's the word they started throwing around everywhere. No one knows what liability really is, but everyone takes a step back when they hear the word. 2 days later, another call, this time from the co-op. We're putting today's load on hold. It's temporary. Temporary, the HOA's favorite word. Temporary things cause permanent damage later. Then an email came from the HOA. The language was very clear, very polite, very innocuous. Community safety concerns, temporary access review, third-party management. Not once did they say the road was theirs. Not once did they say I had done anything illegal. They just wanted to say that everything would be on hold until you cooperated with us. I understood that they didn't want to lose me outright. They wanted me to get tired. Then the complaints started. Some said there was too much dust. Some said heavy vehicles were dangerous for children. Some said the road was ruining the community aesthetic. None of these people had ever been to my farm. No one knew when the cows were to be fed, when the feed was to be delivered, and when the trucks weren't there and the whole day's work was ruined. But no one bothered to complain. One morning, 2 county men came. No uniforms, but badges. Very calm, very professional. We just came to look, they said. I knew what just look meant. They walked the road, took pictures, looked at the drainage. One of them stuck his finger in the ground and said, "Water can collect here." I said, "This place has been flooded for 30 years. He shook his head and took notes. No, that's not true. They need notes. That afternoon, another email came from the HOA. This time, it was a little harsh. Pending county review, usage should be limited. They didn't say what limited meant. I was still using the road because if I didn't, the farm would close. That's when they pulled the trigger. One supplier after another started backing out. Some were direct, some made excuses. Some said, "I'll come back when this problem is resolved." That's escalation. Not yelling, not threatening, just shrinking the area so that you're alone. At night, I would sit at the kitchen table and do my calculations. As before, the papers were scattered, the coffee was cold. But this time, the only difference was time was working against me. A week, 7 days. If it went any longer than that, some contracts would be broken, some wouldn't come back. The HOA knew this. They were calculating. One night, Lane came over and said, "They want you to break down the gate." I knew it, because if I did, I would be the one to blame. The video, the report, the lawsuit, it was all ready. Karen had been nowhere to be seen this whole time. That was intentional. She didn't want it to be personal. She wanted it to be done in the name of the rules. But the problem was, when greed is hidden behind the rules, there's always a loophole. I didn't know exactly where. I just knew the pressure was building. Fast, planned. One evening, I stood in front of the gate and looked at the camera. It wasn't just recording, it was waiting for me to make a mistake. And in that moment, I decided I wasn't going to end this fight quickly. I was going to let them rush me. Because when someone escalates, they assume you're going to break down. I didn't break down. I was just waiting for the next mistake.
I understood then. It wasn't just unfair anymore. It was planned pressure. The kind of pressure that slowly took my breath away, but no one saw it from the outside. The gate didn't just block the road, it blocked time. Time was my real enemy. If you don't make one delivery every day, the red mark on your ledger increases. If you don't get one phone call every day, people's trust decreases. Farm losses don't come screaming, they come in whispers. And then suddenly, one day you realize you can't stand it anymore. I wasn't alone, but the blame was mine. At night, I sat at the kitchen table and spread out the papers. Invoices, contracts, county notices, HOA emails, all together. The coffee had gone cold, but inside my head it was hot. Eli was sitting next to me, silent. Lane stood by the door, hands in pockets, glancing at his watch over and over. No one was saying anything. This silence was the moment to break. I did the math again. 7 days. If you don't open the gate within 7 days or change anything on the paper, everything will slip. This isn't a calculation of anger, it's numbers. Numbers never understand emotions. I looked at the table and said, "If you put the chain on, it's over in 30 seconds. But that's what they want." Lane raised his face, his eyes burning. "So you're saying shut up?" I shook my head. No, shut up. Quite the opposite. I understood. Winning here doesn't mean showing strength. Winning here means taking control. The gate was a trap. The camera was a witness. The signboard was a story. They wanted me to write the story. I decided I wouldn't write the story. I would collect evidence. The next morning I stood in front of the gate. I didn't have the chain at hand. I had a tape measure, a notebook, a phone. I noted everything. The angle of the camera, the height of the keypad, the color of the concrete. The concrete was still wet. Haste. Haste means mistakes. Eli was making a video without words. Lane was writing down the time. The gate wasn't iron anymore. It was paper. Then I hung up the phone. I didn't read the comments. I didn't answer anyone because I knew right now words are dangerous. People make mistakes with words. I couldn't make mistakes.
The first delivery was canceled at noon, then the second. Before the third, the phone rang. The counties said hold. Hold means stop. Stop means die. I hung up the phone. My throat didn't shake, my hands didn't. Something inside me became hard. Not like it could break, like it could hold. The table again in the evening. Eli opened his laptop and sat down. "That company name doesn't sound right," he said. "Access Management LLC. The name is big, the work is hollow." We opened the registry. I looked at the date. Right then when the HOA first raised traffic concerns. Right then when the word temporary solution came up at the board meeting. Coincidence? No. The address came up, not the office, the house. Eli turned the screen. Same last name, the HOA president. Something clicked in his chest. Not anger, clarity. That was the turning point. Because then the game changed. They weren't just showing off, they were making money. The gate with the HOA money, then the gate with the fees from me. Business, turning control into income. It wasn't wrong, it was strategy. I picked up the phone. Not the lawyer, the county clerk first. Calm voice, straight questions. Reclassification filing? Denied. Who filed? Access Management LLC. When? Same day. I got it. They knew they would lose. They did anyway. Because even if they lost, it would buy time. Then the sheriff's office. Less words, more information. Public right-of-way blocked. I took the report number. Another line was added to the paper. Paper was my weapon then. That night, a USB arrived. No notes, just drive. Email inside. Meeting minutes. One line said, "He will negotiate as long as the road is blocked." Another line, "The fee structure will create compliance incentives." That was the bone of contention. I understood then. There was no more question. Now there was a way. And this way was not through chains, through the courts. I took a deep breath. I looked at Eli. Not another mistake. He shook his head. Lane pulled up a chair and sat down. No one laughed. No one cried. It was the last quiet moment before the war. I dialed the name on the phone. Grace Holloway. If she came, it wouldn't escalate. If she came, it would end. That was the breaking point. When I realized I wouldn't react anymore. I would drive. The gate was still standing, but it couldn't hold me back anymore, because I hadn't decided to break it down then. I decided to tie them up in their own paper, and that decision changed everything.
I didn't see the gate move at first. I heard it, a sawing sound, that loud, annoying sound of metal scraping against metal, the kind that if you hear it in the wrong place, tells you something is about to end. I was sitting on the porch. The coffee in my hand was black and hot, but I wasn't paying attention. The pressure that had been building up inside my head for months suddenly didn't want to make a sound. Then the sound came again, a little closer. I stood up. Ellie came out the door behind me, saying nothing. Lane came a little later, hat off, hands in pockets. None of us were in a hurry. I looked down the street and saw a white county truck, flatbed, 3 men, workmen. No cameras, no drama. The gate was still standing, but it didn't look the same anymore. It was no longer a sign of power. It was just a bad decision then. A man was marking the concrete footing with chalk. Another started the saw. Sparks flew. The blackened steel glinted in the light. For the last time. I said nothing. There was nothing to tell them. This work is not done with words. When the first post fell, there was a heavy sound. Something seemed to be released through the ground. I understood then. This was the moment they had never thought of. Karen thought I would put on the chain, thought I would go blind with rage, thought I would destroy myself in front of the camera. What they hadn't thought of, I would wait. The gate was lowered and lifted onto the flatbed. The keypad was removed. The camera was removed carefully so as not to break anything. Everything was calculated. In the end, all that was left was the road, open, breathing. Just then, the first truck arrived, an old delivery truck, the same driver, the one who had been turned away a few weeks earlier. He slowly pulled over, rolled down the window. "Looks like you won," he said. I shook my head. "No," I said. "I just got mine back." The truck slowly moved forward, that sound of the wheels on the gravel. That was the real victory. Karen wasn't in court at the time. She had left through the side door. No one was videotaping, no one was clapping. But I saw her face. Not anger, not insult. Fear. Because in that moment she understood the gate wasn't the problem. The papers were the problem. The HOA group chat went down. The website went offline. The board meeting was postponed with no new date. A few neighbors came up to me later. One said, "We knew something was wrong, but we didn't think it was this bad."
I shook my head, because it wasn't just my story. It was how everyone gradually quieted down, her story. Lane had brought a bottle that evening. The three of us sat on the porch. No one laughed out loud. Suddenly, Ellie said, "They thought power meant gate." I looked down the street. "No," I said, "power means patience." The gate, built with HOA money, was now behind the county truck, the same money Karen had wanted to buy control with. The next day, the letter came. Settlement notice. No words. The numbers were clear. Compensation, legal fees, no future interference. I read it, folded it, and put it in the closet. Because the real payoff wasn't in the money. The real payoff was getting out on the street in the morning, without a gate, without a camera, without a permit. Karen never came down that street again. The HOA never looked at me again. They understood. This fight can't be won with words.
The scariest part didn't start after the gate was lifted. It started when the gate was still standing, but no longer powerful. The morning was strangely calm, very calm, the peace that usually comes before a storm. I stood in front of the farm, looking out over the road. The gate was still there, black steel, cameras, keypads, but now it no longer felt like a barrier. It felt like evidence, a bad decision that no one could hide anymore. The first police car arrived a little after 9 a.m., without sirens, no drama, just a slow-moving county patrol car. They got out, 2 officers, one older, the other new. The older officer looked at the gate and paused, then at me. "Are you the owner of the land?" I shook my head. "Who put this gate up?" I said, "Not me." He didn't say anything else, just taking notes. Then another car came from the county office, then another. People were coming, not lawyers, not board members, record-keeping people. I realized then this wasn't a protest anymore. This was an investigation. They weren't talking like the HOA always talks today. There was no community harmony. There was no safety concern, just questions today. Who created this LLC? Where did the funds come? Who gave permission to put this gate up? No one was giving a straight answer. Karen still hadn't arrived. She usually arrives early. Today, she was late. One thing I noticed, when people are in power, they speak loudly. When they're caught off guard, they speak softly or not at all. Finally, she did. The black SUV slammed the car door shut, just a little too hard. People who are scared always lose control of their bodies. He smiled, but it wasn't a smile. That was a habit. "We were just managing the situation," he said. "It was all a misunderstanding." The older officer looked at her then. "Mrs. Vance, this street is not within your HOA boundaries." He paused. "And why is this LLC registered to your family address?" At that moment, the air around him changed. Karen was silent for the first time. A second, 2 seconds. Then she spoke, but it wasn't as clear as before. "I don't know," she said. Wrong answer. Because in an investigation, "I don't know" means you know, but you can't hide the evidence. The next hour was slow, but brutal. The documents came out. The date was set. The email was received. The funds were transferred. Some of the HOA board members were sitting with their heads down. They may not have known, but they didn't ask questions. That's the real problem with HOAs. Everyone wants power, but no one wants responsibility. A board member whispered, "We didn't vote." The county clerk said quietly, "That's the problem." Then came the words that HOAs never want to hear. Cease and desist. Not in a lawyer's voice, in a police report. The gate became illegal right away, but that's not all. Because it wasn't just the gate that was the crime. The crime was the pressure. Stopping delivery, not officially, but on the fly. Stopping work with review pending. An officer looked at me and asked, "Is this why you were hurt?" I nodded, yes. He didn't ask any more questions, because hurt was no longer an opinion. It was written in numbers. Karen didn't speak again that afternoon. Her phone was ringing. She wasn't picking up. The door to the HOA office was closed, the office where they'd been sending out notices until now. No one was coming out today. As the police left, the older officer looked at me and said, "You didn't break down the gate. That's your greatest strength." I didn't say anything, because the truth was bigger. If I had broken down the gate, I would be the defendant today. Karen would be the victim. But I waited, and if I waited, the lie spoke for itself. For the next few days, the HOA went completely silent. No emails, no notice, no friendly reminder, just a letter from the lawyer, short, cold. Gate will be removed under county supervision.
That line was their downfall, because HOAs never relinquish power on their own. They do when they're forced to. I looked down the street again that morning with my coffee in my hand. The gate was still there, but it wasn't strong anymore. That was a bad decision, one that everyone is paying the price for now. Karen didn't look at me that day. She knew she was no longer in control of this story.
I won, but not in the way people imagine winning. There was no shouting. There was no victory parade. No "I told you so" moment. The victory came on paper, quietly, slowly, just as truth always does when given time. The first week after the court order was strangely quiet, very quiet, as if someone had forgotten to breathe. No emails from the HOA, no clarifications, no community updates. The people who had tried to control my every word suddenly fell silent. Grace told me, when they fall silent, they'll know they've lost. I didn't quite understand it at the time. 2 weeks later, the first letter arrived, legal paperwork. The language was cool, clear, emotionless. The HOA admitted that they had no authority over the road. Access Management LLC claimed to be an independent vendor, but they admitted to procedural irregularities. Those words were important, because the law doesn't understand emotions. The law understands words, and the words were on my side. Then came the settlement offer. I turned down the first one. Grace asked why. I said, it's not just the money. The second was big. The third, big enough. The HOA didn't just agree to pay compensation, they agreed to pay me the full amount of my business losses, not only to not pursue any future claims for road access, refund all gate construction costs, and most importantly, remove the access control clause from the HOA bylaws. That was the real victory. Because I didn't just win for myself, I won for the next person. The person who doesn't know it yet will need it someday. The day the settlement was finalized, I did a very simple job. I got up in the morning and went to work. No press calls, no celebration lunch. I started the truck and drove down the road, just like I had done before the gate. But there was one difference. No one was watching me this time. No camera, no keypad, no permission. Ellie had been quiet that day. She was sorting through papers as if the whole thing was a little too much for her. "Dad," she said suddenly, "what if you broke down the gate?" I stopped. That was a good question. "Then I would be okay," I said, "but I wouldn't win." She shook her head. Lane came in later, lying on the hood of an old truck the way people sit when a war is over. They don't make eye contact anymore. She was right. The people of Clearbrook Meadows still drive by, but they don't ask questions anymore. They don't complain anymore. They don't talk about rules anymore. Karen Vance resigned. Without any announcement, without any goodbye letter, just her name disappeared from the HOA board list one day. Access Management LLC dissolved. The county inquiry is still going on for a few more months. I didn't participate in it. I had nothing to prove. I got my job back. I got my time back, my dignity, the most important thing. I kept it. One afternoon, I was standing by the side of the road. The sun was setting. The gravel was warm underfoot. I wondered, what the hell is this road? It's not just access. It's a line that someone wanted to draw with paper and I erased with law. People still message me, "You're brave. You stood up for us." I don't always reply. Because the truth is different. I wasn't brave. I was patient. I didn't fight. I waited. I didn't break the gate. I let them carry their own burdens. And that was the real victory. After everything is over, there is a strange silence, like when a fight is over. No shouting, no meetings, no announcements, just the sound of work. I still wake up in the morning like I used to. My coffee cup isn't in my hand like it used to be. The only difference is I don't have to wait for permission anymore. The road is open. No gates, no cameras, no authorized vehicles only signs, just the sound of wheels and rocks, as it should be. The HOA office isn't as busy as it used to be. Board meetings are canceled, no emails come in. People who used to never make eye contact with each other now walk across the street. I last saw Karen a few weeks ago. She didn't stop the car. She didn't roll down the window. She just stared for a moment. And then she looked away. Nothing happened, and that's the big deal. The new HOA president is here. He sent me a letter, very politely worded. Past misunderstandings, moving forward, community trust. I didn't answer, because some things don't need explaining.
The man who locks your land never has the right to trust you again. I didn't put the settlement money in the bank. I used it to fix the roof of the old barn. I installed a new water line. I planted 2 oak trees on the side of the road. Because this place shouldn't be a monument to revenge. This is a place to work, a place to live. My daughter said one day, "You know, Dad, everyone thinks being tough means breaking something, but you showed me being tough means not breaking anything." I didn't say anything at the time, because to be honest, I understood it perfectly myself then. Many people have asked me later, "Why didn't you break the gate?" I just say, because that's what they wanted. They wanted me to make a mistake in anger. They wanted video footage. They wanted to make me the problem. But I wasn't the problem. I was proven to the law, to the county, to my daughter, and to myself. This story is not about the road. This story is not about the gate. This story is about control, and about that moment when someone thinks they can put a price on your life. In the end, the HOA didn't just lose, they were exposed. Karen doesn't look at the road anymore, because looking at it reminds her how easy it is to put up a gate and how much paperwork it takes to break it. I walk that road every day, slowly, steadily, no rush, because now I know a person who can stand calmly on his land, no one can easily move him. That's the last thing. And now, the question for you. If the HOA officer has made such a mistake, should he be punished? Tell us in the comments. If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe to us. And if any of your friends like HOA story, share this video with them.